Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Vistage Manufacturing Network webinar on demand. My name is Scott Leeper, and I am the Director of Member Networks at Vistage. This session is a unique opportunity for the Vistage community to learn something new in a short, digestible, on-demand micro webinar. So let's get started. Our session today is titled Mastering Sales Forecasting, Data-Driven Strategies for Manufacturers. And joining us today is Ross Peetham with Fay. Ross has successfully led support teams, managed projects, and provided technical consulting. Currently serving as Vice President of Professional Services at Fay, Ross continues to showcase strong leadership and expertise in their field. I know we're in good hands today, and there's a lot to cover. Ross, I'll turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks very much, Scott. So yes, as Scott mentioned, we want to talk about a couple of things here around sales forecasting in particular for manufacturers. Now, I want to kind of lead out by saying, data for manufacturers and this idea that manufacturers spend a lot of time deliberating over data from their production line is definitely something that I see when I work with manufacturers. But I kind of want to ask the question to get us thinking today, how much of the data that you look at in your sales engine do you deliberate over? How often do you analyze your sales forecast data, and how often do you question how accurate it is and what you can do to make it more accurate? So I want to talk today about the importance of accurate and iterative sales forecasting and how that can give you a competitive edge in your industry. So we're going to be covering a few things. We're going to briefly talk about why sales forecasting is important, specifically for manufacturers. I'm going to be talking about what constitutes or what data constitutes a good and accurate sales forecast. We'll talk briefly about what happens if you don't listen to your sales forecast or you're not doing good sales forecasting. And then I want to save some time toward the end just to show you guys some technologies that are out there today that will help your teams, individuals, and the company as a whole to drive better informed forecasts. So Scott mentioned what I do for a living. I actually am lucky that I get to work with companies across many different industries and sectors, not just manufacturing. A lot of my time is spent implementing sales automation, customer relationship management, and customer experience platforms. Now, it's what I do as a career, but it's also something I'm very passionate about. And so I like to kind of stay abreast of any information that's out there for me to consume. And I came across a study of manufacturing sales professionals earlier this year. It was actually conducted in 2024 by a company called The Manufacturer. So they're a research group out of the UK. But it got my interest because it talked about sales forecasting, but it also talked about, and it showed in its results, some statistics which for me were quite alarming about the disposition of manufacturers towards sales forecasting. So we're going to look at some of that study in today's talk and talk about what it tells us and what we can do slightly differently. But the reason it was surprising to me was because understanding future demand, which is really what sales forecasting is probably 2 or 3 times more important for manufacturers than it is for people in other sectors, given the potential impact on back office costs if you get it wrong. So let's talk about why you should forecast your sales. Now, I think most people that are listening to this are like, yes, an accurate sales forecast will help my business. It's a given, right? But I want to boil that down just a little bit further and talk about how it impacts both growth and efficiency for manufacturers. And they're distinct things. So again, understanding future demand and market trends for your products allows us to do better production planning. We can better manage our inventory. And of course, there are costs involved in getting your inventory being overstocked for demand or understocked in terms of lost opportunities or the cost of managing that inventory. There's the ability to do better resource allocation and capacity planning. Now, all of these things, plus the benefits that you would have being proactive toward supplier relationships, making sure that you've got stock on hand for what it is you're going to be producing. All of these things are clear efficiency gains in being proactive rather than reactive to the demand of your customers. But all of these efficiency gains allow us ultimately to boost customer satisfaction by delivering what customers want when they expect it. So that's efficiency. The other word I mentioned was growth, of course, and every company is going to have a sales plan for the year. These are the sales targets that you want to meet for your growth goals. And if you don't have a sales forecast, then frankly, in my mind, it's almost impossible to make iterative changes through the 12 months of your sales plan for the year to achieve those targets. So again, a sales forecast will tell you whether you are going to meet your sales targets for this particular period, or if you're off your sales target. And knowing the delta between these two numbers is crucial for your sales leaders to decide what they can do now in the month to come or the quarter to come to make that gap up, whether that's bringing sales forwards from future periods or not, but what they can do to keep you on your run rate for growth. So again, sales forecasting is critical, both for efficiency in manufacturing, but also for manufacturing growth. So we've established that sales forecasting is important, right? It's clearly going to be a driver for manufacturers. So I wanted to bring our attention back to the study that I'd mentioned I'd read, because it had a number of statistics in it, which are all of interest, but there was one that got my attention, and that was this one on the left of the screen, which is that 40% of manufacturers don't carry out formal sales forecasting today. Again, the study was 2024, earlier this year, and nearly half of the respondents said that they don't do formal sales forecasting, despite the clear benefits that we just went through on the previous slide. Now, they did go on to ask why that's the case. 59% cited a lack of accurate data, which we'll come back to data and what constitutes accurate data in a moment. 30% point to the high cost of technology tools. And I'm going to be talking about some tools that are out there today that I believe will help any business with their sales forecasting. Now, these numbers, it's worth pointing out, are much lower than what I would expect to find in other sectors like software, financial organizations, or retail. But seeing the hard numbers just made me realize that there's clearly some education still needed in this area. And as I said before, it's more important for manufacturers than in many other sectors. So in my experience, manufacturers do understand the role of sales data. They get it, they know it's important, but those results again suggest that they're not understanding it, or at least some of them are not understanding it to its fullest potential. So let's talk a little bit about what is good sales forecasting and what data needs to be considered in order to have an accurate forecast. Now, I've got a few things up on screen here, just some guiders to kind of what I see happening. First of all, a sales forecast should not be driven by historical sales data alone. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because it is something I see happening in lots of companies, and I'll speak about why I think that happens quite a lot. Another thing that you must have is that you need to consider everything you know about the customer. Again, not just the sales information you already have on them, but there's so many other factors, often outside of your control, that you need to consider in your forecast. The final point is that it's always changing. So it's not like your sales plan for the year. It's always changing. There's always outside external factors that are going to impact your sales forecast. So it needs to be very iterative and not something that you set and forget. So one thing that I see happening a lot, coming back to that first point on historical sales data, many manufacturing companies run their businesses through an ERP product. It's often the first software investment most companies make. And it's normal that they would do that. It's got, a lot of information in there that's going to be critical to the health of your company and also your inventory and stock and everything else. But most ERPs begin life or had begun life as an accounting software with balance sheets and GLs and all this information that we control quite nicely. Now, they have come on a massive amount over the last 10 to 15 years, and they actually do a lot more than some of the basic things they were doing around the 2000s. But the point is, it is very structured data, and a lot of the time they were set up for a specific group of actions. Now, it's natural that companies would look at this data when trying to predict future sales. It's very trustworthy data. And that financial data, the trends on what you've been selling in previous periods, perhaps what you sold this time last year, it's all valuable information that should absolutely be considered as part of your forecast, but it is not the whole picture of everything that you need to consider. Yes, it's important to see what people are purchasing, but it doesn't really tell you what people are not purchasing. What should they be ordering, for example? So a good example would be, is a customer of yours purchasing one product, but they're not purchasing a complementary product that you also produce? And if they're not purchasing that from you, then they're probably purchasing it from someone else. Equally, maybe you have two customers, one that is both of the same size, similar type, but one is spending significantly more than the other. Again, why is one company not spending that extra money with you? What could you be doing? What products are they not purchasing from you that you can position? And again, these are all things that are going to affect your sales forecast. The other obvious one here is, as well, of course, is churn. And again, is any of your customers not purchasing as much, and what can you do to address that potential for attrition and get ahead of that? So again, these are all things that are going to move your sales forecast up or down, as long as you're able to interpret that information and react to it. The other thing I wanted to talk about is everything else we know about our customers. And a lot of this data you have, some of it you perhaps don't have and is kind of out there in the world. But these are all things that will impact the buyer decision as well. Now, I call this soft data rather than this hard data about sales that you've actually had with a customer. This is soft data because you're a little bit less in control of everything that's going on. But if I was to break down the soft data, I kind of get it into these two buckets. One would be intent data, which you can Google about and it'll explain it a bit more. But intent data I define as interactions the buyer has had with you and your brand. So these might be support tickets they've had about a recent order that they've had with you. It might be, are they interacting with your marketing content? What conversations have you been having with them via email and phone or even chat today? These are all things that should help us be informed of the customer's intent to continue buying with us, buy more from us, buy from us for the first time, or even stop buying from us as well. And then there's environmental data, which is really anything else that impacts the buyer's decision to purchase your product or purchase from you guys specifically. This could be the state of the economy, stakeholder changes, maybe the CEO changes. There's so many factors, even the weather, right? Especially if your customers are cyclical or their demand is driven based on the climate or changes to the climate. So there's lots of things that needs to be considered. These things all impact your sales forecast and therefore allow you to get those efficiency goals later. Now, one cautionary tale, and there's loads if you wanted to research these, but I'll keep it quick for today, of what happens if you don't listen to the information that's available to you and then react to that information, is that of Peloton. Now, if you don't know who Peloton are, they produce home fitness products. Around the start of the COVID pandemic, there was a huge uptick in demand for their product as gyms closed and people couldn't go out. They capitalized on that by ramping up production rapidly. You can see kind of what happened to their stock price over that period. The interesting thing here is look where it ends in January 2022 and where it began. It's only fractionally above where it began 2 years before. So the kind of story here is they didn't take advantage of this huge opportunity they had, both to sell more product, but then also maintain their strength within their market. And the reason for that was, yes, they ramped up production. Yes, they made lots of sales. You can see that hockey stick there. But then as demand for their product started to wane, and they had information about this from their marketing and sales team, again, intent data, that the demand for their product was dropping as the economy was opening back up. Despite that information, they didn't change their approach towards their production. They became horribly overstocked. And then there were a number of subsequent decisions that actually led to them having some significant financial strain. So this is what can happen if you either don't track all of the information and consider that in your sales forecast, or do not react to your sales forecast. Again, I can't speak to exactly what was going on in the decision makers of Peloton over that period of time, but what is clear is they did not take advantage of a big opportunity they had. Now, maybe the reasons for these is because measuring customer intent, understanding a lot of that environmental soft data is very hard thing to do. right? So I mentioned ERP systems before and how they've improved so much over the years, but at their core, these are systems focused around structured transactions, invoices, sales orders, shipping, payments. They're all transactions that the business fully owns. They're processes that the business owns. They're controlled by the business. Data is collected in a particular way that they understand, is structured in a way they understand. When you want to then look at that data, it's easy for the business to understand, and there is a high level of trust in data that sits in your ERP system for the most part. Okay, so it's normal again that this is an easy place to go when we want to try and predict our sales, and maybe that was influencing Peloton in their decisions of continuing to up production because previous month sales were so high. But when you consider the sales process, everything that happens prior to a sale, it's not something the business is in control of. It's the customer that's in control of everything that happens pre-sale. They're choosing when to send you information, how often to send you information, what format the information is that they're sending you. And you don't really have any control about it. You just need to try and receive it and understand it. And it's difficult to draw conclusions from it. So they might be emailing you, there are Zoom meetings, Excel spreadsheets they may be sending you. They're dictating who's involved, and there might be multiple people involved. So really the point here, if I was going to make one, understanding the customer journey and what's happening in these early stages of pre-sales, even for existing customers, is not easy. You may have a repeat order opportunity that you've taken year over year, and it's normal you would include that in your sales forecast, but you should never take a sale for granted, ever. And that can happen if you just look at previous periods and trust only your hard data. So again, what's happening with this company? Do they have some news feeds out that might impact that very predictable sales order that I get year over year? Maybe they've just lost one of their biggest customers. How's that going to impact the sales forecast, or anything else that's likely to cause that particular piece of forecast revenue to actually close as a confirmed sale? Now, intent data is definitely unstructured, right? You're receiving it in different ways. The word intent data is a bit of a new buzzword, but it's certainly nothing new. Sales reps have been listening and evaluating that kind of information since sales began. But until recently, measuring or trying to put some boundaries around this unstructured data has been the reserve of human beings. And even then, in my experience, at best, the judgment that's being made on that information is subjective, right? It can change between a couple of different individuals who are receiving the same information. And it's very, very difficult to do when you're trying to do it at scale. Again, I'm thinking about an account manager here that has 100+ accounts. It's very difficult to get all of that information plus the hard data and then make informed and accurate decisions about a sales forecast. So I want to talk a little bit about how technology can help you with this. I think probably the clearest thing that I can say is if you want a prediction on future sales, well, you need to be asking your sales team. And if you want your sales forecast to be accurate, it needs to be a summation of well-informed decisions taken at a very granular level across all of the deals that the sales team are aware of. Now, this means sales teams need the tools that will allow them first to track sales opportunities, including its value and expected close date. That's a given in any system, and most systems, whether even ERP systems, allow you to do this. But it also needs to allow them to identify upsell opportunities. It needs to allow them to identify cross-sell opportunities, the potential for churn within their account. It needs to allow them to see which deals require their attention versus deals that are less likely to close. And it needs to help them make sense of all of this intent data, the environmental data, and then be able to quickly adjust both their approach and the sales forecast in reaction to all of these things. It's a lot to take on, and again, very difficult to do at scale. Now, many years ago, about 25 years ago, CRMs kind of rose up to meet some of this need. And for the longest time, they have served as a place for collecting and exposing this data back to sales reps with the goal of helping them track their deals, close more deals, and kind of understand the customer and sales pipelines better. But sales reps still need to make sense of a lot of information, and there continue to be challenges. Again, today we're working in a world where there's so much data that we can collect. The cost of data is a lot cheaper and we can have more of it, but it's easy to become overwhelmed by data. And again, when we're talking about the customer buying patterns, these are often, sometimes they're seasonal, but sometimes they differ by customer. So trying to understand that in a big book of business is very, very difficult. Now, if you've been on any technology webinar over the past 2 years, you probably would have heard, oh, but it's an exciting time today. But it really is an exciting time because there's lots of new technologies that, for the first time, make it a lot easier for us to make sense of this information that's available to us at scale. And more so than that, those technologies that allow that transformation are present today in many CRM and ERP systems. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are actually out there today that will help your sales teams be more informed of the information that's available to them. So I want to talk about AI-driven insights. I'm going to give you some examples of some different softwares that are out there and just show some of these tools and explain a little bit about what's going on. The first one that I want to talk to is this. So this is what's called AI-driven insights, and it's actually taking some of this hard data that sits in your ERP system. It's almost an abstraction layer is what it's doing between this hard data that tells you everything post-sale, and then is exposing this to sales reps or account managers in a way that allows them to make sense of just the information they need when they need it. Now, this type of technology allows businesses to identify opportunities that they perhaps didn't realize they had. So, for example, is this particular customer buying eggs from us, but they're not buying any bacon? And again, complementary products that we produce, and why aren't they buying bacon from us? They're probably buying bacon from somewhere else. So again, it can suggest opportunities, raising your sales forecast. It also helps reps ask the right questions as well. Again, I gave that example before about two companies with the similar size and type, one spending more than the other. Why is the smaller company not, or the same size company spending less with us? What products are they not purchasing, and what could I then position to them? And what questions do I want to ask them when I get them on the phone? Just generally, this allows us to have good conversations at scale when I'm managing lots of customers, to actually be effective when I do get on the phone with my customer. Now, there's a couple of things here. There's a couple of stats that I pulled from a different study that was done, I think it was in 2023. It actually suggested that sales reps get just 5% of the buyer's time when having conversation. That's because the buyer's often off doing their own research, speaking to competitors. So you need to be informed and asking the right questions when you do get the opportunity to speak with the buyer. There was a similar stat from the Aberdeen Strategy Research Group that suggested that sales reps spend 43 hours a month just searching for information. And again, when you think about how much information is available, it's not surprising to me to hear that statistic. So these types of tools that allow you to see a sales trend, what they've sold year over year, compare them to similar accounts, can really drive efficiency and allow you as a sales rep, or your teams as a sales rep, to get the best out of the time they spend with a customer. And again, inform the sales forecast accordingly. Some other technology that's been out there for some time, which some of you may have seen over the last 5 years, is sentiment analysis. Again, just in general here, the idea of sentiment analysis is to look at a phone call that we've had, can take a transcript, maybe emails that we've been sharing, or even customer success tickets, and put a AI-driven or machine learning-driven kind of assessment of the sentiment of what's going on there. Again, this just allows us when we're exposing all of this information to understand what's really happening versus perhaps what we believe or our perception of what a particular interaction with a customer of ours has been. So again, were these support ticket interactions positive? Were they negative? And again, these are all things that can impact the likelihood of a customer to continue buying from us or to buy from us in the first place. This is where predictive AI can also come in. You'll actually find this available in lots of systems today. I'm going to show a couple of examples. This is, again, machine learning for the most part. Various CRMs and ERPs have this. They really just take information about deals that you've closed in the past, and they try and put some point system around it using machine learning. And then they look at things that are in your pipe today, and they tell you, hey, this has got a lot of similarities with these deals that you typically close. So this is an area where you want to be spending your time. It can also, in some systems that I work with, look at that sentiment analysis as well and fold all of that into a single score that allows you to kind of rank and say, hey, I want to be spending my time on this versus something else that's in my pipeline. Now, this is really important because, again, as humans, we need to understand what we're good at and what we're not good at. Winning fast is great, but losing fast is equally important. And I do and have seen, I've been guilty of this myself, people and sales reps pursuing deals that objectively have little chance of closing because of the potential upside, right? I really want this to close, and so I'm going to, be a little bit blinded to what I'm really seeing. And these types of scores allow customers or sales reps to be thinking about where should I objectively be spending my time versus where my emotions are sending me. Then, of course, there's the baby of every webinar over the last 2 years, which is generative AI. This is your ChatGPT and everything that's going on in that area. But this is actually just starting to find its way into ERP and CRM systems in various different kind of formats, I guess you'd call it. I expect this to continue to evolve because it is so new. The key thing here is that this is capable of understanding so much more information than even humans are for the most part, and again, more so at scale, and then be able to serve us up not just a score or, hey, this is a good idea or this is a bad deal, right? It's able to give us much more than that. It's able to allow us to summarize everything that's going on a particular deal, which is kind of its superpower, show us pain points, what do we need to overcome, what are the next steps we need to take. Even that customer intent to buy is actually able to surface this. And I've seen this with experienced sales reps. Seen experienced sales reps get very excited about this because it shows them things that they had not considered in terms of what to do next. I also think it's a big game changer for sales managers that are able to go and try and find the extra revenue to fill up their sales gap to make their target, for example. Being able to get summaries like this and then be able to say, this is the next prescriptive thing that we should be doing to close this deal. I think this is really going to be a game changer, and it's been in a lot of systems now for about 2 or 3 months out there in leading CRMs. Just the final point here, again, is coming back to that question I led with. What can we do to make our sales forecast more accurate? Is it accurate? A lot of this also includes looking back at your sales forecast, understanding where it was at one point, where it ended a particular period. And again, there's lots of technologies out there today that are time aware and can show you what happened with your sales forecast over 2 periods, which is what we're seeing here. So this is actually showing us how our sales forecast come in to the period here on the 15th of August, what changes it had over that period that grew the sales forecast, whether that's deals coming in from previous periods or new deals coming in, what dropped in terms of things, maybe deals lost, and where it ended up at the end of that period. So again, there's so much more data that we can actually consume, even in graphical ways today, to help us both understand what impacts the sales forecast, why it's changing, but also what we can do to understand what's happening over a particular period. So if I was to sum some of this up, just some key takeaways. Accurate and effective sales forecasting is critical to growth. and efficiency, right? Supplier relationships, capacity planning, the ability to deliver what customers want when they need it, and our ability to grow and meet our sales targets. Good forecasting needs to consider all of the data, hard and soft data. If you're not doing that, then you might fall foul of some of the things that other companies have done in the past and miss out on opportunities. Forecasts are always changing. It needs to be proactively nurtured. It requires proactive attention right at the lowest level with your sales teams. And if you're not already doing this, just know that your competitors, they are. So I led with 40% of manufacturing companies are not doing this, 60% are, and I can guarantee that your competitors are doing this already if you're not doing it. So if there's one extra piece of information that I could give you guys, lots of people will say, what should I do next? How can I leverage some of these newer technologies? I would probably recommend that you look at CRM or ERP systems that do support manufacturers particularly. Again, there's lots of different softwares out there that will help you manage your sales forecasts and your sales in general. But if you just look at B2C businesses, they're not going to be interested in this historical buying pattern of somebody that buys from them, once or twice a year. B2B manufacturers, very different landscape there. You want to be driving these well-informed relationships, be a first-class partner to them, and understanding a lot of that information is key. And a lot of systems are actually set up to better support that type of customer relationship than some of these more transactional B2C ones. So just a final point here, and thank you for your time. We here at Fay, we eat software. That's kind of our slogan, so that other companies don't have to do that. So if you do have questions around what steps should you take to leverage some of these tools, or how sales forecasting could help you either get a competitive edge now against other companies that are not doing it, or just stay present and not get left behind, then you're welcome to reach out to us here. Over to you, Scott.
Awesome. Ross, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and tips during this on-demand webinar. Fascinating information. I learned a lot, so thank you. Make sure to look for all of the thought leadership content from Fay on the Manufacturing Network, including blogs and other additional webinars. And finally, if you have not done so already and are a Vistage member, please take a moment to join the Vistage Manufacturing Network or any of our 32 online communities listed at vistage.com/networks. We look forward to your ongoing participation in all of our network activities. Thanks again for watching. Stay well and be kind.